Margaret Hayes buried her husband on a Monday in October of 1978. The funeral was held at the First Methodist Church in Hastings, Nebraska. Over 200 people came. Richard Hayes had been farming for 34 years. He was respected, liked, the kind of man who'd help a neighbor without being asked and never mention it again. Margaret sat in the front pew with her 3 children. Robert, 26, Susan, 23, David, 19. They'd all come home when Richard got sick, stayed through the hospice, through the final days, through the end, cancer, pancreatic, diagnosed in March, dead by October, 7 months from healthy to gone. After the service, people came back to the farm, brought food, offered condolences, said things like, "If you need anything," and "We're here for you," and all the other things people say when they don't know what else to say. By 8 p.m., everyone had left, except Margaret's children. They sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Richard had sat every morning for 30 years. The chair at the head was empty now. "Mom," Robert started carefully, "we need to talk about what happens next." Margaret looked at her oldest son. "What do you mean?" "The farm, 300 acres, the equipment, the house, all of it. We need to figure out what you're going to do." "I'm going to keep farming it." Silence. Susan spoke next. "Mom, you're 54 years old. You've never farmed alone. Dad did all the field work. You helped with the books and the house, but—" "I know how to farm," Margaret interrupted. "I've been on this land for 32 years. I know every field. I know the equipment. I know what needs to be done." "But can you physically do it?" Robert asked. "Running a tractor 12 hours a day, maintaining equipment, hauling grain." "Mom, it's not that we don't think you're capable, but—" "Then what is it?" "We're worried about you. We don't want you working yourself to death, trying to keep this place going out of stubbornness or sentiment." Margaret's jaw tightened. "This isn't stubbornness. This is my home. This is what your father and I built together. I'm not selling it." David, the youngest, finally spoke. "No one said you have to sell it, Mom, but maybe you could lease it out. Let someone else farm it. You'd still own the land, still get income, but you wouldn't have to do the work. Your father and I never leased our land to anyone. We farmed it ourselves. That's not changing." Robert sighed. "Mom, be realistic. Winter wheat needs to be planted in 3 weeks. Can you handle a tractor and a grain drill for that long? Can you do spring planting, summer maintenance, fall harvest, all by yourself?" "I won't be by myself. I'll hire help when I need it." "With what money? Mom, do you even know what the farm's finances look like?" Margaret stood up. "I know exactly what they look like. I've kept the books for this farm since 1946. I know what we have, what we owe, what we can afford. Your father and I ran this operation together, not just him, both of us." She looked at each of her children. "I appreciate your concern, I really do, but I'm not selling this farm. I'm not leasing it out. I'm farming it. And that's final." She walked out of the kitchen and went to bed. Tuesday morning, Margaret woke up at 5 a.m., same time she'd woken up for 32 years. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table alone. Richard's chair was still empty. She cried for 10 minutes. Then she wiped her eyes, drank her coffee, and went out to the machine shed. The equipment was all there. Richard's 1968 John Deere 4020, his 1974 4430, the grain drill, the disc, the plows, all of it maintained meticulously because that's how Richard was. Margaret had driven these tractors before. Not often, but enough to know how they worked. She'd helped with harvest when extra hands were needed. She'd hauled grain to the elevator. She'd done plenty of farm work over the years, even if Robert didn't remember or didn't think it counted. She climbed onto the 4430, started it up. The engine roared to life. She let it warm up, then drove it out to the equipment yard and began hooking up the disc. It took her an hour. She hadn't done it in a while, and the pins were stiff, but she got it done. Then she drove out to the east field and started working the ground. The tractor was loud, the cab had no air conditioning, the diesel fumes were strong. The work was repetitive and exhausting. Margaret worked until 2 p.m. Then she came back, parked the tractor, went inside, and collapsed on the couch. She was 54 years old, and her body wasn't used to 8 hours on a tractor anymore. Her back ached, her hands hurt. She was exhausted, but she'd done it. She'd worked the east field, proved to herself that she could do this. Wednesday, she did it again. Different field, same process. Wake up, coffee, tractor, field work until exhausted, come home, collapse. Thursday, she worked through the pain. Her children called. She told them she was fine. She wasn't fine, but she was determined. By Friday morning, Margaret had worked 4 straight days. She'd disked 3 fields. She was sore, tired, and running on fumes. And that's when Richard's family showed up. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something about Richard's family. They hadn't visited the farm in 8 years, hadn't called in 6 months, didn't come to the hospital when Richard was dying, showed up to the funeral late and left early, but on Friday, 5 days after the burial, they drove up to Margaret's farm with papers and a plan. If you want to know how a widow defended her land from people who wanted to take it from her, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened on that Friday changed everything. 3 vehicles pulled into the driveway at 10 a.m. Friday morning. Richard's brother, Thomas Hayes, his sister, Patricia Morrison, Patricia's husband, Charles, and a man Margaret didn't recognize in a suit. Margaret was in the machine shed doing maintenance on the 40-20 when she heard the vehicles. She came out wiping grease off her hands. Thomas got out of his truck. He was 62 years old, owned a hardware store in town, hadn't farmed a day in his life. Margaret, good to see you. Thomas, Patricia, what brings you out here? We need to talk. Can we go inside? Margaret looked at the 4 of them, at the serious expressions, at the man in the suit carrying a briefcase. Who's he? This is Douglas Reinhardt. He's a real estate agent, specializes in farm sales. Margaret felt her stomach drop. Why is a real estate agent here? Can we go inside, please? They went into the house, sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Margaret had argued with her children 4 days ago. Thomas started talking before Margaret could even offer coffee. Margaret, we've been talking, the whole family, and we think it's time to sell the farm. This isn't your decision to make. Actually, Thomas said carefully, it partially is. Richard left the farm to you in his will, yes, but he also left certain provisions that require family consultation on major decisions. The real estate agent Douglas pulled papers from his briefcase. Mrs. Hayes, according to the will filed with the county, while you inherit the property, any decision to significantly alter the operation, including selling, requires the agreement of Richard's surviving siblings. Margaret stared at him. That's not true. Richard left everything to me. I was there when we wrote the will. The will was amended in 1975, Douglas said, perhaps without your knowledge. Your husband added a clause requiring family consensus for any sale of the property, which means his siblings have a say. Margaret looked at Thomas, at Patricia. You knew about this? Thomas had the decency to look uncomfortable. Richard mentioned it to us years ago, said he wanted to make sure the farm stayed in the family no matter what happened. And now you're using it to force me to sell. We're not forcing anything, Patricia said. We're being practical. Margaret, you're 54 years old. You can't run 300 acres by yourself. Richard could barely keep up with it the last few years. I've been farming it for 4 days. I'm managing fine. For 4 days, Charles interjected. What about 4 months, 4 years? How long do you think you can physically do this? As long as I need to. Thomas leaned forward. Margaret, listen. Douglas here has already done a market analysis. The farm is worth about $450,000. Land, equipment, everything. If we sell now, you'd walk away with enough money to buy a nice house in town. Live comfortably. You'd never have to worry about anything again. I already live comfortably, here, on my farm. It's not just your farm, Patricia said quietly. It's the Hayes family farm. Richard's grandfather broke this ground in 1901. It's been Hayes land for 77 years, and it should stay Hayes land. I'm a Hayes. I've been Margaret Hayes since 1946. You know what I mean. Blood family. Richard's children don't want to farm. They all have careers elsewhere. So the farm should go to someone in the family who does want it, like Thomas's son or Patricia's boys. Margaret looked at Thomas. Your son lives in Omaha and works for an insurance company. He could learn, Thomas said defensively. No. What you mean is you could sell the farm, split the money, and your son could keep living in Omaha while you all profit from land Richard and I spent 32 years building. Silence. We're not the bad guys here, Patricia finally said. We're trying to help you. You're going to work yourself to death trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. Everyone knows you're strong. Everyone knows you're capable. But this is too much for one person. Richard did it alone for the last month when he was too sick to have help, Margaret said. I helped him. I was there. I know what this farm needs, and I can provide it. Douglas cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, there's something else you should know. The family has already contacted a buyer, a corporate farm operation out of Iowa. They're interested in acquiring the property. They're offering $475,000. That's $25,000 over market value. It's an excellent deal. I don't care if it's $1 million over market value. I'm not selling. You don't have a choice, Thomas said. The will requires family agreement. We're invoking that clause. We want to sell. And legally you can't stop us. Margaret stood up. Get out of my house. Margaret, get out. All of you. Now. Thomas stood slowly. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help you before you hurt yourself. If you wanted to help me, you would have visited Richard in the hospital. You would have called. You would have been here when he needed family. Instead, you show up 5 days after I bury him with a real estate agent and papers trying to take my home. You're not here to help. You're here to profit. Patricia's face reddened. How dare you? Get out. They left. But Douglas left his business card on the table, and as they were walking out, Thomas turned back. We'll give you 2 weeks to think about it. But Margaret, this is happening, with or without your cooperation. Talk to a lawyer if you don't believe us. Then they were gone. Margaret stood in her kitchen, shaking with anger, looking at the business card on her table, and she realized she was in a fight for her farm. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to defend something that was rightfully yours from people who had no right to it? Leave a comment, because Margaret was about to learn that fighting for your land requires more than just determination. Margaret called her children that afternoon. Robert was furious. They what? They can't do that. Apparently they can. The real estate agent had papers, said Dad amended the will in 1975 to require family consensus for selling. Did he? I don't know. I don't remember him doing that, but maybe he did and didn't tell me. Susan was crying on the phone. Mom, this is insane. They didn't even come see Dad before he died. Now they want to take the farm? They think they're doing what's right, or at least that's what they're telling themselves. David asked the practical question. What are you going to do? I'm calling a lawyer. I need to know what my rights are, and then I'm going to keep farming. Because the best way to prove they're wrong is to show them this farm doesn't need selling. She called James Whitmore on Monday morning. He was the attorney who'd handled Richard's will originally. He was 73 now, semi-retired, but he still took her call. Margaret, I'm so sorry for your loss. Richard was a good man. Thank you, James. I need your help. Richard's family is saying the will requires their approval to sell the farm. Is that true? There was a pause. Let me pull the file. Can I call you back? He called back an hour later. His voice was grave. Margaret, I'm afraid Thomas is correct. Richard came to me in 1975 and requested an amendment. He wanted to ensure that any decision to sell the farm had to be approved by his siblings. He said it was to protect the family legacy. Margaret felt her world tilt. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know. I advised him to discuss it with you. He said he would. I assumed he had. So they can force me to sell. It's complicated. They can't force you to sell against your will, but they can block you from selling if you wanted to. And there's another provision. What provision? If the siblings determine that you're unable to maintain the farm adequately, they can petition the court to force a sale on the grounds that the property is being mismanaged. Margaret's blood ran cold. Define adequately. That's the problem. It's vague. It would be up to a judge's interpretation. But theoretically, if they can prove you're not maintaining the property to the standard Richard maintained it, they could argue for a forced sale. So they're going to watch me, wait for me to fail, then use that as justification to take my farm. Margaret, I won't sugarcoat it. You're in a difficult position. My advice, farm this land better than it's ever been farmed. Give them no ammunition. And consider settling this through negotiation rather than litigation. Court battles are expensive and unpredictable. Margaret thanked him and hung up. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then she went out to the machine shed and got back to work. Over the next 3 weeks, Margaret farmed like her life depended on it, because it did. She planted winter wheat, all 80 acres that had been scheduled for wheat. She worked 12-hour days, started at sunrise, finished after dark. Her back ached constantly. Her hands developed calluses and then blisters, and then calluses again. She lost 8 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, but she got the wheat planted, every acre, on time, done right. Her children begged her to slow down. Susan drove out from Lincoln every weekend to help. David came home from college when he could. Robert tried to hire farmhands to help, but Margaret refused. If I hire help, they'll say I can't do it alone. They'll use it against me. Mom, no one expects you to do this completely alone. They're looking for any excuse, any sign that I can't handle this. I'm not giving them one. Thomas and Patricia didn't visit, but Margaret knew they were watching. Neighbors mentioned that Thomas had been asking around town, asking how Margaret was doing, whether the farm looked maintained, whether she seemed to be keeping up. They were building their case. In November, Margaret got a letter from Douglas Reinhardt, the real estate agent. Formal, legal language, offering her 60 days to reconsider the sale in light of the upcoming challenges of winter maintenance and spring planting season. She threw it in the trash. December brought snow. Margaret spent days clearing her driveway, fixing fence lines damaged by winter storms, and maintaining her equipment in the shop. On Christmas Eve, her children came home. They sat around the same kitchen table. Richard's chair was still empty. "Mom," Robert said gently, "you've proven your point. You can farm this land. Everyone knows it now. But at what cost? You're exhausted. You've lost weight. You're working yourself to death just like we worried you would." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're surviving. There's a difference." Margaret looked at her son. "What do you want me to do? Give up? Let them win? Let them sell the land your father and I spent our entire lives building?" "No. But maybe there's a middle ground. What if you hired a full-time farmhand, someone who could do the heavy work? You'd still run the operation, still make the decisions, but you'd have help." "With what money?" "We'll help," Susan said. "The 3 of us. We'll chip in to pay a farmhand's salary, just until you can afford it on your own." Margaret shook her head. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. we're offering. Mum, we love you. We don't want to lose you too. Please, let us help. Margaret was quiet for a long time. Okay, but I'm paying you back, every penny, once the farm's profitable again. Deal. In January of 1979, Margaret hired Danny Fletcher. He was 24 years old, grew up on a farm 20 miles away, strong, hard worker, needed a job. She paid him $800 a month. Her children covered half of it. Margaret paid the rest from the farm account. With Danny's help, the farm transformed. Fields got maintained. Equipment got repaired. Work that had taken Margaret 12 hours now took 6. She was still exhausted, still worried, still fighting to keep her land. But she wasn't alone anymore. In March of 1979, 5 months after Richard's funeral, Thomas and Patricia came back. They arrived unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. Margaret and Danny were in the shop working on the 4430 when they pulled up. Thomas got out of his truck, looked around, saw the well-maintained fields, the organized equipment yard, the clean shop. Margaret, place looks good. Thank you. I hear you hired help. I did. Danny Fletcher. Good worker. So you couldn't do it alone after all. Margaret set down her wrench. I'm running a 300-acre farm by myself at age 54. I've planted wheat, maintained equipment through winter, and kept everything running. Hiring one farmhand doesn't mean I failed. It means I'm running a business smartly. Patricia spoke up. We're not here to argue. We're here to make another offer. I'm not selling. Just hear us out. The Iowa company is still interested. They've increased their offer to $500,000. Margaret, that's $50,000 over market value. You could retire, live comfortably, never worry about anything again. I don't want to retire. I want to farm. Thomas sighed. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Because it's my home, because it's what Richard wanted, because I can do this, and I'm proving it every day. For how long? Another year? 5 years? Eventually you're going to be too old, too tired. What happens then? Then I'll deal with it then. But right now, I'm farming, and I'm doing it well. You have no grounds to force a sale. Charles, who'd been silent, finally spoke. Actually, we might. We've been consulting with our own attorney. The will provision about mismanagement, it's broader than you think. It's not just about whether you can farm the land. It's about whether you're maximizing its value. What does that mean? It means that by refusing to sell when offered significantly over market value, you could be argued to be mismanaging the asset. You're costing the estate money by turning down a profitable sale. Margaret stared at him. You're going to sue me for not selling my own home. We don't want to, Patricia said. But if you force us to, we will. Margaret, please, just consider the offer. Talk to your children. Think about what's really best for everyone. I have thought about it. My answer is no. They left again. But as Thomas was getting in his truck, he turned back one more time. We're filing papers next week. Petition for forced sale based on mismanagement of estate assets. I'm sorry, Margaret, but you're leaving us no choice. Let me stop here and ask you something. If someone tried to take something you'd worked for your entire life, how far would you go to keep it? Drop a comment, because Margaret was about to discover that sometimes defending your land requires more than just hard work. Margaret called James Whitmore that afternoon. They're suing me. I know, I received notice this morning. Margaret, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a difficult case. The will language is vague enough that a judge could interpret it multiple ways. What do I do? You fight. You document everything. You prove that you're not mismanaging anything. You show that the farm is profitable, well-maintained and operating successfully. And you hope the judge sees this for what it is, a greedy family trying to profit off a widow. Will that work? I don't know, but it's your best shot. The court date was set for May, 2 months away. Margaret spent those 2 months farming harder than ever. She and Danny planted all 300 acres, corn and soybeans. They worked dawn to dusk, kept meticulous records of everything, every expense, every decision, every maintenance task. She hired an accountant to prepare financial reports showing the farm's profitability, hired a surveyor to document the property condition, gathered testimonials from neighbors about the farm's appearance and operation. She was building her case. Her children helped. Robert hired a photographer to take aerial photos of the farm. Susan compiled decades of financial records showing the farm's history. David reached out to other farmers in the county, gathering statements supporting Margaret. The family that had tried to divide the farm ended up uniting against the threat. The hearing was held on May 15, 1979, 7 months after Richard's funeral. The courtroom was small, County Courthouse in Hastings, Judge Morrison presiding. Thomas and Patricia sat on one side with their attorney. Margaret sat on the other with James Whitmore. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Thomas's attorney argued that Margaret was mismanaging the estate by refusing a significantly over-market offer, that she was being emotional and irrational, that she was operating the farm inadequately given her age and physical limitations. James countered with financial records showing the farm was profitable, with photographs showing immaculate maintenance, with testimony from Danny Fletcher describing the operation's success, with statements from neighbors praising the farm's condition. And then James called Margaret to testify. She sat in the witness box and told her story. About 32 years on this land. About building the operation with Richard, about learning every field, every piece of equipment, every aspect of farming, about the last 7 months, running it alone and succeeding. Thomas's attorney cross-examined her, asked about her age, her physical capability, whether she could maintain this pace for years to come. Margaret looked directly at the judge when she answered, "I don't know if I can do this for 10 more years. I don't know if I can do it for 5, but I know I can do it today and tomorrow and every day until I can't. This land isn't just an asset to be sold to the highest bidder. It's my home. It's my life's work. It's what my husband and I built together. And I have the right to live on it and farm it for as long as I'm able." His family didn't care about this land when Richard was alive. They didn't visit, didn't call, didn't help when he was dying. They only care now because they see dollar signs. I'm not mismanaging anything. I'm protecting something precious from people who only see its price tag. The judge was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then he announced his decision. "I've reviewed the will language. I've considered both arguments. And I find that Mrs. Hayes has demonstrated more than adequate management of the property. The farm is profitable, well-maintained, operating successfully. The mere fact that she declined a sale offer, regardless of price, does not constitute mismanagement. She has the right to live on and farm her own property. Furthermore, I find the timing and nature of this petition troubling. The petitioners showed minimal involvement in Mr. Hayes's life before his death and minimal support for Mrs. Hayes after. This appears less like genuine concern for proper estate management and more like an attempt to profit from a recent widow's property. Petition for forced sale is denied. Mrs. Hayes retains full control of the property. Case dismissed. Margaret exhaled for what felt like the first time in 7 months. Thomas and Patricia left the courthouse without speaking to her. Margaret never heard from them again. She farmed that land for another 18 years, until 1997, when she was 73 years old and finally ready to retire. She sold the farm then, not to a corporation, to a young farming couple just starting out, gave them a below-market price and seller financing they could afford. "Richard and I started with almost nothing," she told them. "Seems right to give someone else that same chance." She moved to a small house in town, lived there until she died in 2011 at age 87. Her children inherited what remained of the farm sale proceeds. They split it 3 ways, used it to pay for their children's college educations, and every one of Margaret's grandchildren heard the story of the woman who buried her husband on Monday, ran his farm despite everyone's doubts, and defended it against her own family's greed by Friday. The woman who proved that a widow could do what no one thought possible. Not because she was superhuman, but because she refused to let anyone tell her what she couldn't do. So let me leave you with this. Right now, someone's telling you you can't do something, that you're not strong enough, not capable enough, not qualified enough. But she buried her husband on Monday, was told she couldn't farm his land, was told to sell, was told she'd fail. By Friday, his family came demanding she sell. She refused, she farmed, she fought, she won. Not because it was easy, but because it was her home. Her life, her choice, and no one, not her husband's family, not a real estate agent, not a judge, could take that from her without a fight. If this story changed how you think about what widows are capable of, about fighting for what's yours, and about refusing to give up when everyone expects you to fail, do 3 things. First, subscribe for more stories about people who defended what mattered against impossible odds. Second, drop a comment. Have you ever had to fight to keep something that was rightfully yours? Third, share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than anyone gives them credit for. She buried her husband Monday. His family came Friday demanding she sell. She farmed that land for 18 more years instead, and she proved that the only opinion that matters is your own. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.